So we bought about $1,000 of tips at this week's 5-year tips reopening auction. And that's what I'll be talking about in today's video. And specifically, these are the 3 questions I'll be answering. Which numbers you should consider before making your buy versus not buy decision. Where these tips are listed on Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, and Treasury Direct if you want to buy. Why we decided to buy just $1,000 of tips instead of the original $10,000, and why you may or may not want to buy more. As usual, here's our front of video disclaimer. For a detailed disclaimer, please refer to the end of this video. And for those of you who are new to tips, to Treasury inflation protected securities, I've linked these 2 Tips 101 videos in the description below so that you can get up to speed on what tips are, including their pros and cons, as well as how to buy them. Hello, Super Saver. I hope you're having a good week. So, as many of you may recall from last week's video on future iBond and tips rates, which I've also linked below, the real yield on 5-year tips is approaching a level that it hasn't hit in more than a decade, as you can see from this green line. And as a reminder, the real yield on tips is basically the yield that an investor will earn above inflation, like now, and in some cases below inflation, like here. Be sure to check out our latest members-only videos if you're interested in diving deeper into bond investing and how to navigate the risks and returns of fixed income. Right, so it's precisely because yields are here and not here. That's why we were planning at first to pick up $10,000 of these tips at this week's 5-year tips reopening auction, after reviewing the numbers from this Treasury offering announcement for these tips. More on why I scaled this tips purchase down from $10,000 to $1,000 towards the end of this video. Because first, I want to walk through some important pricing numbers from this Treasury offering announcement for those of you who are interested in picking some of these up or who have already put in your purchase orders. So as you can see, this is a 4-year, 10-month, 1.25% tips. And it is a reopening auction because the original issue auction already took place in April. As some of you may remember, a reopening auction is one where Treasury Direct sells additional amounts of a previously issued Treasury security. The reopened Treasury security has the same CUSIP, the same maturity date, and in the case of tips, the same interest rate or coupon rate as the previously issued Treasury security. But the Treasury security in a reopening auction has a different issue date, as you can see here. This was the issue date of the original issue auction. And this is the issue date for the reopening auction that is taking place this week. And the Treasury security in a reopening auction also usually has a different price because market conditions and expectations change regularly and therefore have an impact on pricing. To calculate the approximate price for these tips, let's scroll all the way down to this inflation index ratio of 1.01121. What this 1.01121 inflation index means is that if we place an order for $100 par value of these tips, we would actually be buying $101.12 of principal. This $101.12 of principal is a 1.01121 inflation index multiplied by $100 par value. And the $1.12 added to the original $100 principal, that's essentially the increase in principal from the inflation protection feature of the tips for the time since the original auction. So if we go to Bloomberg at the time of this taping, we can see that 5-year tips are actually trading at a market price of $97.43, not at $100, not at par. Here's what we need to do next to get an estimated price for the upcoming 5-year tips auction. We take the current market price from Bloomberg for 5-year tips of $97.43 and multiply by the inflation index provided by the Treasury offering announcement of 1.0112, getting us to an approximate purchase price of $98.52 for $101.12 of already adjusted principal. Not bad, or? Also, we would need to pay accrued interest of 26 cents per $100 of these tips purchased. That's this line here divided by 10 because this is based on $1,000 of tips purchased, not $100. I've linked this video on accrued interest in the description below for those of you who want more details on how accrued interest works. Now, keep in mind that these numbers are based on the latest market price for 5-year tips over Father's Day weekend, after markets closed. So they will change by the time you watch this video and by the time the auction takes place. These approximations should nonetheless provide some guidance in terms of price expectations, assuming no bank collapses or other major market turmoil between Father's Day weekend and Thursday's tips auction. I've included the links in the description below if you want to update these numbers based on when you're watching this video. We were able to find these tips at auction at all 4 of the places that many of you in the community use to buy treasuries from. So let's walk through what you're looking for. So if you're buying via Fidelity, Schwab, or Vanguard, the first thing to do is to get to the Treasury auctions page on their website. I've linked these how to buy T-bills videos for all 3 of these leading brokerage companies in the description below for those of you who aren't sure how to get there. Once you get to the Treasury auctions page, if you're with Fidelity, this is the 5-year tips you're looking for. On Schwab, it's this one here. And on Vanguard, just scroll down and it's this one right here. On Treasury Direct, just click on Buy Direct, and on the page that appears next, click on Tips, Notes, and Bonds, and then Submit. And on the following page, this is the tips that we've been talking about in today's video. If you're interested in purchasing these tips, my general recommendation is to do it the night before, and especially if you're planning on buying from Treasury Direct, since they typically process purchase orders the next business day only. And if you do want to place your order on the day of the auction with Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, or another broker, be sure to check their cutoff times. And always remember to double check the QSIP as well as other relevant information before you click that place order button. Now, let's talk a bit about why we scaled back our purchase amount of these tips and why you may or may not want to. So as I sat there in front of this preview order screen on Fidelity's platform, contemplating whether or not to click on this place order button for $10,000 of 5-year tips at the upcoming auction, I went back to this chart again and finally figured out what had been bugging me about this all weekend. And it was this: why buy here if there's a chance that this might happen again? This is where real yields on 5-year tips peaked during the Great Recession of 2008, during the last crisis. And the same goes for 10-year tips, this new yellow line. Now, as I always say, I don't have a crystal ball. No one does. And past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. But as I've touched upon in videos here, as well as in our member zone, we are of the opinion that things will get worse before they get better. And yes, I am working on a video which will walk through why we think this is the case. It was actually supposed to go out some time ago, but the debt ceiling crisis in May and early June overshadowed everything else. But it'll be coming soon, so stay tuned for that one. In any case, my personal belief is that these real yields will go higher. Maybe not next week or next month, but perhaps in late 2023 or even 2024. So why tie ourselves into 5 years of a fixed income investment now, given that we think we may be able to do better by waiting a few more weeks or months? Now, do keep in mind that this is my decision based on our financial journey, and everyone's financial journey is different. If we were closer to retirement and looking for inflation protection, or if we didn't already have a fair amount of I-bonds in our portfolio, or if we believe that the Fed was done hiking rates, I might be loading up at the upcoming 5-year tips auction, because as we've already seen, the real yields on these tips are pretty attractive right now. And this is before we talk about the break-even inflation rate on these 5-year tips. The break-even inflation rate on these 5-year tips is equal to the nominal yield on a 5-year Treasury. So this number here minus the real yield on a 5-year tips, this number here, giving us a break-even inflation rate on these 5-year tips of 2.17%. Meaning that if inflation averages more than 2.17% annually over the next 5 years, these 5-year tips will outperform the 5-year Treasury. If inflation averages less than 2.1% annually over the next 5 years, then these 5-year tips will underperform the 5-year Treasury. I mean, 2.17%. Come on. Year-over-year inflation is at 4% based on the latest round of inflation numbers. The average over the past 60 months, or 5 years, has been around 3.4% annually, and the average over the past 120 months, or 10 years, has been tracking at about 2.7% annually. So, if you think inflation will be higher than 2.17% annually on average over the next 5 years, assuming the numbers stay relatively similar to what they are now by the time the auction takes place, then these 5-year tips are attractive relative to a 5-year Treasury note. And these real yields on 5-year tips that I showed you earlier are also looking pretty good. Now, if you're still on the fence about the upcoming 5-year tips auction though, here are some questions that may help you decide whether this 5-year tips auction may be right for you. Ask yourself this. 1. Am I in my 50s, 60s, or older, and or close to or already in retirement? 2. Do I not have enough inflation protection in my fixed income portfolio? And 3. Am I afraid these rates will go away? If you answered yes to all of these questions, plus you've watched these tips videos and fully understand and are ready to deal with the specific nuances and complexities that come with owning tips, then this upcoming 5-year tips auction may be something that you should consider. For us, we answered no to all these questions. And as many of you in the community already know, I really do believe that we are living through an almost generational opportunity in fixed income currently. So even if we miss out on this upcoming 5-year tips auction here, in my mind, there'll be other tips auctions with similar or possibly even more attractive yields. And more importantly, there will be enough other fixed income opportunities that we can take advantage of in the short to medium term. If you feel similarly, or if you want to learn more about bond investing in general, then be sure to check out our latest members-only videos and dive deeper into the world of bonds with like-minded individuals. Click on this join button on our channel page or the join link in the video description below for more details. If you're a bit less adventurous, then this one here on the top CDs this month may be a better fit. All right, Super Saver, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and see you again very soon with more brand new wealth building content for your financial journey.